Let's begin in the United States. The US and China have agreed to pause their trade war. Both nations are seeing eye to eye to lower import taxes on goods being traded between Washington and Beijing. US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent says the trade talks between the two nations were conducted with a motive to avoid escalation, claiming that the US does not want a generalized decoupling between the two largest economies in the world.
We do not want a generalized decoupling between the two largest economies in the world. What we want is the U.S. is going to decouple in strategic industries, which we saw during COVID.
Washington and Beijing are cancelling some tariffs altogether and suspending others for 90 days by 14th of May. The additional U.S. tariffs on Chinese imports, that's the extra tariffs imposed in this recent standoff, will fall from 145% to 30%, while recently hiked Chinese tariffs on some U.S. imports will fall from 125% to 10%. However, U.S. measures still include an extra 20% component aimed at putting pressure on Beijing to do more to curb the illegal trade in fentanyl, a powerful opioid drug. China has also halted other non-tariff countermeasures, which includes the export of critical minerals to the U.S., which it put in place in response to the initial escalation. The announcement of the agreement between the world's two powerhouse economies has been broadly welcomed worldwide, with hopes that the U.S.-China trade truce would finally put a stop to a full-scale tariff war. Most Asian stocks rose, tracking a rally in Wall Street, following a rapid $6 trillion surge in the S&P 500 from the brink of a bear market. Trading action on Monday suggested more upside. Gains in Asia were driven by Japanese stocks, with the topics rising for the 13th consecutive day. The UK and China deals led to investor optimism of a wider de-escalation in the ongoing US-led trade war on multiple fronts. Investors are jumping back into Asian stocks as they unwind the defensive measures put in place at the height of April's tariff chaos. Mr. Raymond E. Vickery is a former U.S. Assistant Secretary for Commerce, for Trade Development and Senior Associate at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. Mr. Vickery, thank you very much for making time for us and welcome to the program. Do you see a certain change in dynamics or in the way Trump is handling his so-called rules now that he's mellowing down to China?
Well, thanks very much for having me. It's always a pleasure to be on WION. It seems to me that this pause, of course, is welcome, particularly because there is a relationship between what happens economically and what happens strategically. And if you're going to build peace and prosperity throughout the world, you have to have a rules-based system on the economic side as well as the security side. That having been said, it seems to me that the markets have already discounted some of the Trump so-called initiatives of Liberation Day, April the 2nd. The markets had already come back, and they have gone up further on the announcement of this pause and partial rollback in terms of U.S. and Chinese tariffs. The reality is that President Trump seems to show a certain incoherence in regard to policies in regard to tariffs as he is in immigration. There's somewhat of a whipsaw effect. The latest whipsaw, it seems to me, is the U.S.-China situation, in which the problem was largely created by the Trump administration, now partially ameliorated so that President Trump can show what he would claim as a victory when he goes to Saudi Arabia and other places in the Middle East today. I think the damage has been done, however, and it's going to take a lot of work by great democracies like India and the United States in order to get back to some rules-based system such as we've had under the WTO and before that under the General Agreements on Tariffs and Trade. It's no question that this is going to have an impact on U.S.-India negotiations, as it will with the U.S. and all others. So it's a welcome pause, but we still do not have policy coherence, and we're not out of the woods in terms of this whipsaw effect and the damage it provides both economically and strategically.
Mr. Raymond, what would be your advice to Americans at this juncture?
Well, I think that we have to get back to doing what the United States has been doing since World War II. And that is being a leader in a rules-based economic system. We had a multilateral consensus approach with most favored nation and some semblance of a process for being able to resolve differences. Now, there were problems with that, and so what we need to do is to get back to that general approach, but provide the reforms to take account of the rise of India, China, and other economies that weren't there when the WTO and the GATT were first introduced. But we have to have some foreseeability. There has to be stability. Business, economics, hates uncertainty. And this up, down, back and forth that is being put into effect by the Trump administration is just not sustainable. The Secretary of the Treasury knows that, and others know that as well.
Mr. Raymond Thackeray, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you for talking to us today.
Thank you for having me.